The stale air in the living room felt suffocating as Carol's words sliced through me like a dagger. "Why don't you just admit you're a failure?" she spat, arms crossed, her icy glare piercing into my soul. Matt swiftly stepped in front of me, shielding me from his mother's venomous rage. His broad shoulders tensed, a physical barrier against the torrent of cruelty that had become all too familiar. "That's enough, Mom," he said, his voice low but firm. "We've barely set our bags down, and you're already starting this again." Carol's lips curled into a snarl. "Well, it's the truth, isn't it? My son deserves better than a barren wife who can't even give me grandchildren." The words stung like acid, but I remained silent, biting my lip to hold back the tears threatening to spill. This was our life now, a constant battle against Carol's relentless verbal assaults and manipulations. Matt's hand found mine, squeezing it reassuringly. "We're not having this discussion again. Julia is my wife, and I love her. That's all that matters." Carol threw her hands up in exasperation. "Fine, keep living in denial, but don't come crying to me when you realize the mistake you've made." With that, she stormed off, leaving a tense silence in her wake. I let out a shaky breath, leaning into Matt's embrace. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, his warm breath tickling my ear. "I never should have agreed to stay here." Pulling back, I mustered a weak smile. "It's not your fault. We had no idea it would be this bad." Matt's brow furrowed, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "We can't keep living like this, Julia. It's not healthy for either of us." I nodded, my heart heavy with the realization that our once peaceful lives had been shattered by the toxic presence of a woman who was supposed to be family. But in that moment, I knew we had to find a way out, for our own sanity and the future we so desperately craved. As I lay awake that night, my mind drifted back to the winding roads that had led me here, a world away from the small Kansas town where I was raised. Growing up, I had always dreamed of escaping the confines of that rural life, yearning for the excitement and opportunities that big cities promised. It was that desire that propelled me through college, studying economics with a laser-focused determination. And when I landed a job as an accounting clerk in San Francisco, fresh out of university, it felt like the first step toward my new life. The city was everything I had imagined and more. A vibrant, pulsing hub of culture, ambition, and endless possibilities. It was there that I met Matt, a kind-hearted city native who worked in the planning department. From our first date, there was an undeniable connection, a spark that transcended our vastly different backgrounds. Matt was charmed by my small-town roots, finding a refreshing innocence in my wide-eyed wonder at the big city, and I was captivated by his confidence, his worldliness, and the way he effortlessly navigated the fast-paced urban landscape. It didn't take long for us to fall deeply in love, and when Matt proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I was ready to start this new chapter of my life, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. At first, Carol seemed warm and welcoming, embracing me with open arms as the daughter-in-law she had always wanted, but that facade quickly crumbled once the subject of children came up. "So, when can I expect some grandkids?" she would ask, a glint of determination in her eyes that made me shift uncomfortably. Matt would brush it off with a nervous chuckle, but I could sense the mounting tension each time the topic arose. It was as if Carol viewed my sole purpose as being a vessel for her grandchildren, and my inability to conceive immediately raised her suspicions. The comments became more frequent, more pointed, until they evolved into outright accusations. "You're not getting any younger, you know," Carol would remark, her words laced with venom. "The clock is ticking." I tried my best to ignore her jabs, pouring my energy into my job and my marriage. But with each passing year, Carol's grip tightened, her manipulation growing more insidious. The nightmare truly began when Carol faked an injury, forcing Matt and me to move in with her to help with her recovery. At first, we rationalized it as a temporary situation. A few weeks, maybe a month or two at most. But those weeks soon stretched into years, and Carol's true colors emerged in full force. "I don't know why you're wasting your time with that job," she would sneer as I got ready for work each morning. "You should be focusing on having babies, not crunching numbers." Her words cut deep, but I tried to brush them off, reminding myself that she was just a bitter, lonely woman lashing out. Matt did his best to shield me from the worst of her attacks, but Carol was relentless. She would slip fertility clinic pamphlets into my bag when I wasn't looking, or leave them strategically placed around the house. "Just in case you change your mind," she would say with a sickly sweet smile that made my skin crawl. The emotional toll was immense. I found myself constantly on edge, dreading each interaction with Carol, yet powerless to escape her clutches. My once thriving career began to suffer as the stress and anxiety took their toll, and even my relationship with Matt started to strain under the weight of it all. "Maybe we should just leave," I suggested one night, my voice thick with emotion. "This is too much, Matt. I can't take it anymore." He pulled me close, his strong arms providing a temporary refuge from the storm. "I know, baby, but where would we go? We can't afford our own place right now." It was a harsh reality, one that left me feeling trapped and hopeless. Carol had us right where she wanted us, and she reveled in our misery. "You know, if you really loved my son, you'd give him what he wants," she would say, her words dripping with malice. "But I guess you're just too selfish for that." Each barb felt like a dagger to my heart, and I found myself questioning my own worth. Was I really failing Matt by not being able to have children? Did he resent me for it, deep down? But whenever I voiced these fears, he was quick to reassure me. "Don't listen to her, Julia. You're everything to me, and I love you just the way you are." Still, the doubt lingered, fueled by Carol's relentless campaign of psychological torture. It was a vicious cycle that seemed to have no end in sight. I stepped through the front door, my shoulders slumped from another long day at the office. The familiar scent of home greeted me, but something felt off. An eerie silence hung in the air, and as I made my way down the hallway, a knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. When I reached our bedroom door, my heart dropped. The room was completely bare. No furniture, no decor, not a single personal item in sight. Just 4 empty walls staring back at me. "Matt?" I called out, my voice trembling. "What's going on?" He appeared in the doorway, his face pale and eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Without a word, he brushed past me and began frantically searching the other rooms. I followed close behind, my heart pounding in my chest as the truth slowly sank in. Room by room, we found the same scene, our belongings stripped away, leaving nothing but hollow spaces. Finally, we made our way to the living room, where the source of this nightmare was waiting for us. Carol sat smugly on the couch, surrounded by trash bags overflowing with our possessions. "Looking for something?" she sneered, her lips curled into a sickening grin. Matt's hands balled into fists at his sides. "What the hell have you done, Mom?" Carol rose to her feet, her eyes boring into me with a hatred I had never witnessed before. "I'm just doing what any good mother would do, protecting her son from a worthless wife who can't give him children." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I found myself paralyzed by the sheer cruelty of her actions. Matt stepped forward, positioning himself between Carol and me. "You're out of your mind." He spat. "This is too far, even for you." Carol's laughter was like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, please, don't act so surprised. You knew this was coming. She's never going to be good enough for you, and it's time you opened your eyes to that fact." With a swift motion, she grabbed a trash bag and hurled it at Matt's feet, its contents spilling out in a jumbled heap. My clothes, my books, my most cherished mementos. "Get out of my house," she snarled, her eyes burning with a fury I had never seen before. "Both of you, and don't come crawling back until you've come to your senses." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. This was no longer just a battle of words or a clash of wills. Carol had crossed a line, and there was no going back. As I gathered what little I could into my arms, I felt Matt's hand slip into mine, a silent reminder that we were in this together. We may have lost our possessions, but we still had each other, and that was something Carol could never take away. With our meager belongings stuffed into a couple of suitcases, Matt and I fled to the safety of a hotel room, our sanctuary from Carol's wrath. As the door clicked shut behind us, I finally allowed the tears I had been holding back to flow freely. "I'm so sorry," Matt whispered, pulling me into his embrace. "This is all my fault. I should have protected you from her." I shook my head, burying my face in the crook of his neck. No, this isn't your fault. Your mother. She's gone too far this time. We stood there, clinging to each other as the weight of what had happened slowly sank in. Carol had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and in that moment I knew our lives would never be the same. After what felt like an eternity, we finally broke apart, and I sank onto the edge of the bed, my body and spirit drained. Matt sat beside me, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, providing the strength I so desperately needed. "Julia," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I need you to know something. No matter what happens, no matter what my mother says or does, you are everything to me. You're my world, and I wouldn't change a single thing about you." His words were like a balm to my wounded soul, and I found myself falling in love with him all over again. This man, who had stood by me through the worst of his mother's cruelty, still saw me as the most precious thing in his life. "I love you too," I whispered, my fingers intertwining with his. "And I promise we'll get through this together." It was in that moment of vulnerability and connection that I felt a flutter deep within me, a subtle reminder of the life we had created together. A life that Carol knew nothing about, a secret gift that had blossomed despite her best efforts to destroy us. As if sensing my realization, Matt's eyes widened, his gaze dropping to my stomach. "Julia, are you—" I nodded, a tremulous smile spreading across my face. "I just found out a few days ago. I was waiting for the right time to tell you." Matt's expression shifted from shock to pure unbridled joy as he cupped my face in his hands, planting a tender kiss on my forehead. "This changes everything," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. And in that moment, a plan began to take shape, a way for us to start anew, free from Carol's toxic influence. We would fake a divorce, change our names, and disappear from her life completely. No more manipulation, no more cruelty, just the two of us and our precious little one, embarking on a fresh start filled with love and hope. As I drifted off to sleep that night, cradled in Matt's arms, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Carol may have tried to break us, but in the end, she had only made us stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever to build the life we deserved. With a sense of determination fueling our every move, Matt and I set our plan into motion. We knew it was the only way to truly escape Carol's toxic grasp and start fresh. First, we filed for divorce, a heartbreaking formality, but a necessary step in severing our ties to our old lives. The legal paperwork was a mere technicality, a smokescreen to conceal our true intentions from Carol. Next, we changed our names. No longer would I be Julia, the woman Carol had tormented and belittled. I became Emily, a new identity unburdened by the past. And Matt shed his old self, emerging as Michael, a man reborn, ready to embrace the future we were crafting together. Every detail was meticulously planned, from establishing new email accounts and social media profiles to obtaining fresh identification documents. We left no stone unturned, ensuring that Carol would have no way to track us down once we disappeared. With our new identities in place, we began the search for a new home, a sanctuary where we could raise our child in peace, far away from Carol's poisonous influence. It wasn't an easy task, but eventually we found the perfect little house in a quiet neighborhood, a world away from the chaos we had left behind. As we unpacked our belongings in our new home, a sense of liberation washed over me. This was a fresh start, a clean slate where we could write our own story, free from the shackles of the past. "I can't believe we're finally here," I murmured, running my hand over the swell of my growing belly. Michael smiled, his eyes shining with a happiness I hadn't seen in far too long. "Believe it, Emily. This is just the beginning." In those early days, we lived in a state of constant vigilance, ever watchful for any sign that Carol had caught wind of our whereabouts. We knew that if she ever discovered our ruse, she would stop at nothing to track us down and reclaim her twisted sense of control. But as the months passed and our little one grew stronger within me, our fears began to subside. We had successfully slipped through Carol's grasp, vanishing without a trace. With each kick and flutter, our determination to build a life free from her toxicity only grew stronger. We poured our hearts into creating a nurturing environment for our child, filling our home with love, laughter, and all the joy that Carol had so desperately tried to deny us. And when the day finally came, and our beautiful son entered the world, we knew that every sacrifice, every hardship had been worth it. Cradling him in our arms, we made a silent vow. Nathan would never know the pain and torment we had endured. He would grow up surrounded by unconditional love, cherished and protected from the cruelty that had once threatened to consume us. As I gazed into his innocent eyes, I knew that our journey had only just begun. But this time, we were the authors of our own story, and nothing, not even Carol's darkest machinations, could ever tear us apart again. The holidays had always been a bittersweet time for me, a reminder of the family I had lost when we cut ties with Carol. But that year, as Michael and I sat by the twinkling lights of our Christmas tree, our little Nathan babbling happily in my arms, I felt a sense of peace and contentment I hadn't known in years. We had built a life beyond our wildest dreams, a safe haven where love and laughter reigned supreme. Carol was little more than a distant memory, a specter from the past that no longer held any power over us, or so we thought. It was a few days after Christmas when the fateful envelope arrived, its nondescript appearance giving no hint of the bombshell it contained. Michael slid it open with a casual flick of his finger, and that's when our world came crashing down around us. Inside was a simple Christmas card, but the image it bore was enough to steal the breath from our lungs. There we were, smiling radiantly, our new names emblazoned beneath our faces, Emily and Michael. And cradled between us the precious bundle that had given our lives new meaning, our son Nathan. How? I choked out, my hands trembling as I clutched the damning evidence. How could she have found us? Michael's face had drained of all color, his expression a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. I don't know, he whispered, his voice barely audible, but she knows everything. In that moment, the illusion of safety we had so carefully constructed shattered like fragile glass. Carol had found us, and with that simple act, she had reclaimed the power to torment us, to disrupt the sanctuary we had built. The phone rang, its shrill tone piercing the oppressive silence that had fallen over our home. Michael answered with a terse greeting, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscles rippling beneath his skin. "Hello, dear." Carol's sickly sweet voice crackled through the speaker, laced with a smugness that made my blood run cold. "Did you like my little surprise?" Michael's knuckles whitened as he gripped the phone, his entire body rigid with barely contained fury. "How did you find us?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. Carol's laughter was like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, please. Did you really think you could hide from me forever? I'm your mother, Michael. I know you better than anyone." The vitriol spewed forth, a torrent of accusations and recriminations that laid bare the depths of Carol's depravity. She spared no detail, flaunting her deceptions and thefts as if they were badges of honor. With each poisonous word, I felt my resolve hardening, my love for Michael and our son burning brighter than ever before. This was our life, our family, and no twisted, bitter woman would ever be allowed to taint it again. When Michael finally found his voice, it was laced with a steely determination that sent a chill down my spine. "Listen to me, and listen closely," he growled. "You are never to contact us again. You are never to come near us or our son. As of this moment, you are dead to me. Do you understand?" Carol's response was a shriek of outrage, but Michael had already ended the call, slamming the phone down with a finality that reverberated through the room. As he gathered me in his arms, I knew that this was the end. The true, final severing of the toxic bond that had plagued us for far too long. Carol's machinations had failed, her cruelty ultimately serving only to strengthen the love and resilience that bound our little family together. From that day forth, we vowed to live our lives on our own terms, unburdened by the weight of the past. Nathan would grow up cherished and adored, never knowing the darkness that had once threatened to consume us. And as for Carol, well, let's just say that karma has a way of evening the scales, a lesson she would soon learn in the most brutal of ways. The years that followed were a whirlwind of joy and growth, as Michael and I savored every moment of raising our precious Nathan. With Carol's toxic presence firmly in the rearview mirror, we were finally able to breathe freely, basking in the warmth of our little family. Of course, the news of her grandchild's existence had hit Carol hard, a harsh karmic retribution for all the pain and anguish she had inflicted upon us. but we refused to let her bitterness and resentment cast a shadow over our happiness. Instead, we focused our energies on building the life we had always dreamed of. Michael's hard work and dedication paid off with a well-deserved promotion, allowing us to move into a spacious home with a lush backyard where Nathan could run and play to his heart's content. As for me, I finally found the courage to pursue my own professional ambitions, enrolling in night classes to earn a degree in accounting. It was a grueling schedule, juggling motherhood and studies, but Michael was my rock, supporting me every step of the way. On the rare occasions when doubt crept in, whispering insidious thoughts of inadequacy, I would look into Nathan's adoring eyes and find the strength to push forward. He was my inspiration, my constant reminder of the love and resilience that had carried us through our darkest days. And then, one crisp autumn day, a letter arrived, an invitation to my parents' house for a long-overdue family reunion. My heart swelled with a mix of joy and trepidation as I realized how long it had been since I had seen the people who had once been my whole world. Michael must have sensed my apprehension, for he pulled me close, pressing a tender kiss to my forehead. "It'll be okay," he murmured. "They're your family, Emily. They love you." With his reassurance bolstering my courage, we packed our bags and set off on the long journey back to Kansas. Nathan practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of meeting his grandparents for the first time. The moment we stepped through the door of my childhood home, it was as if no time had passed at all. My parents swept us into their warm embrace, tears of joy streaming down their faces as they marveled at the beautiful little boy clutching my hand. "Oh, Julia, Emily," my mother corrected herself, her eyes shining with love and acceptance. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. You've built an amazing life for yourself." My father nodded, his weathered features creased with a broad smile. "And this little guy," he added, ruffling Nathan's hair, "he's one lucky kid to have parents like you two." In that moment, surrounded by the unconditional love and support of my family, I knew that we had truly won. Carol's cruelty had not broken us. Instead, it had forged us into an unbreakable unit, a fortress of love and resilience that no force on earth could ever penetrate. As the days slipped by, in a haze of laughter, reminiscing, and gleeful chaos courtesy of Nathan's boundless energy, I found myself reflecting on the long, winding road that had brought us to this point. The struggles, the heartache, the moments when we had teetered on the brink of despair, all of it had been worth it for the sheer bliss of being surrounded by those who loved us. Flaws and all. And as for Carol, well, let's just say that karma had a way of evening the scales. After a health scare left her dependent on distant relatives who resented her very presence, she found herself utterly alone, a bitter, withered husk of a woman reaping the consequences of her own cruelty. But that was a fate I refused to dwell on, for it held no power over me anymore. My focus was solely on the future, a future brimming with love, laughter, and the promise of endless joy, all thanks to the incredible man by my side and the miraculous child we had brought into this world against all odds. As I watched Michael chase Nathan through the backyard, their peals of laughter ringing out like music, I knew that we had truly won. Carol's hatred had been vanquished by the power of our love, and nothing, not even the darkest of pasts, could ever dim the radiant future that stretched out before us.